A couple of years ago, I recorded an item for Top Gear in which I quoted the rhyme "eeny meeny miny mo." There is a racist expression that I was extremely keen to avoid. It did appear that I'd actually used the word I was trying to obscure, that I'm sitting here begging your forgiveness.
It was the peak of British television. Millions tuned in every Sunday for fast cars, reckless jokes, and the untouchable charisma of Jeremy Clarkson. But behind the screeching tires and roaring laughter was a man spiraling. In the shadows of Top Gear's global dominance, Clarkson's personal life was collapsing, his long-standing marriage was unraveling, and the British tabloids were circling like vultures. Affairs, lawsuits, scandals, each headline louder than the last. But this wasn't just a messy divorce. This was the kind of slow-motion crash that didn't just shatter a family, but it almost obliterated a career. What happened when the loudest man on television lost control of the one thing he couldn't outdrive? His private life. This is the untold story of the divorce that nearly ended Jeremy Clarkson's career. And trust us, it's more explosive than any Top Gear special. Welcome back to Tuna No Crust, the largest car TV show news on YouTube. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's roll. Jeremy Clarkson was no ordinary TV host. He was a motoring rock star. By the 2000s, he had transformed BBC's Top Gear from a niche car show into a global phenomenon with 350 million weekly viewers. With his towering frame and brash wit, Clarkson became the unapologetic face of the program, the driving force behind the show's explosive international success. Off camera, he enjoyed a comfortable life in the Cotswolds with his wife Frances Kane, who was also his manager, and their 3 children. Married in 1993, Clarkson and Frances built a 21-year life together. Friends described Frances as the steady hand behind the outspoken star, known for buying him car-themed gifts and even managing his business affairs. By all appearances, Clarkson's career was in high gear and his home life solid, but behind the sarcastic on-screen persona, Jezza was a complex figure with real human vulnerabilities. As one colleague later noted, Clarkson cares deeply for those close to him despite his bluster. This private side would soon be put under immense strain. By the early 2000s, the pressures of Clarkson's fame and personality began to take a toll on both his public and private life. His jokey, edgy humor increasingly landed him in hot water. A series of Top Gear controversies erupted. He was rebuked for calling an Asian man a slope in a 2014 Burma special.
But there's a slope on it.
A term Ofcom ruled was a deliberate racial slur, and footage leaked of him mumbling an alleged racial epithet in an outtake, for which he begged for forgiveness. The BBC's patience wore thin. By mid-2014, BBC executives had given Clarkson a final warning about his behavior, and even launched an internal review of Top Gear's culture to stem the tide of controversy surrounding its star. Behind the scenes, Clarkson's personal world was coming apart. Rumors swirled that he had been unfaithful to Frances. In 2011, during Top Gear live tours, he grew close to a colleague, Philippa Sage, sparking tabloid allegations of an affair. Frances had endured Clarkson's long absences and occasional indiscretions for years, but this was the last straw. She moved out in early 2014 and reportedly went on holiday to toast the impending split. After 21 years of marriage, the couple separated in May 2014 and soon divorced. Frances took their children and, it's said, deserved every penny of the settlement for putting up with Clarkson. For Clarkson, the breakdown of his marriage was devastating. Over pints at a London pub, he confided to rival-turned-friend Piers Morgan just how many fronts of his life were under siege at once. I'm going through a difficult divorce. My first ex-wife has come out of the woodwork to give me hell. I'm smoking too much, drinking too much, my back hurts. I'm all over the papers with this N-word scandal. I'm at war with my BBC bosses, and my mother has just died. Clarkson sighed in exhaustion. In fact, his beloved mother Shirley had passed away in March 2014, just days before Clarkson's N-word controversy exploded in the press. The BBC nevertheless pressed him on the scandals. I said, "My mother's just died." please leave me alone. But they wouldn't. Clarkson recalled of that harrowing time. Emotionally and physically, Clarkson was nearing a breaking point. Even as he kept up his jokester image on Top Gear, those close to him saw the strain. We were all burned out, and the stress of it all caused my worst breakdown ever, admitted Philippa Sage, the colleague who had become Clarkson's companion during his separation. By late 2014, Clarkson was a man walking a tightrope, a messy private life, a final warning at work, and immense stress pushing his temper ever closer to the edge. The stage was set for an explosive collapse. On a cold evening in March 2015, that collapse came. Filming Top Gear on location in rural North Yorkshire, Clarkson returned to his hotel hungry and tired, expecting the hearty steak dinner he had requested. When he learned no hot meal had been arranged, something inside him snapped. In what BBC officials later described as an unprovoked physical and verbal attack, Clarkson unleashed 30 seconds of fury at producer Oysen Tymon, punching him in the face and splitting his lip. Witnesses overheard Clarkson berating Tymon with the strongest expletives and threats. A tirade so loud it echoed into the hotel's dining room. The stunned producer drove himself to A&E for his injuries, while Clarkson reportedly continued fuming long after the brief burst of violence ended. News of the incident, soon infamously dubbed the steak fracas, sent shockwaves through the media. The BBC suspended Clarkson on 10th March 2015, pending an investigation. Fans rallied to his defense. Within days, nearly 500,000 supporters had signed a petition demanding his reinstatement. The number would swell to over 1 million. But as details emerged, it became clear Clarkson had finally crossed a line no amount of popularity could excuse. On 25th March 2015, BBC Director General Tony Hall announced the decision that many thought unthinkable. Jeremy Clarkson's BBC contract would not be renewed, effectively firing him from Top Gear. Hall praised Clarkson's talent and contributions over the years, but lamented that a line has been crossed. There cannot be one rule for one and one rule for another. After 27 years with the BBC and 13 years at the helm of the reborn Top Gear, Clarkson's tenure ended in disgrace. Clarkson's co-hosts Richard Hammond and James May, out of loyalty, refused to continue Top Gear without him. In one fell swoop, the BBC lost all 3 stars of its flagship show. For Clarkson, the professional consequences were dire. He was now axed from the show he loved, a show that was absolutely my baby, as he later reflected. I worked all the time on it and paid attention to every little detail, he said, mourning the sudden loss. Leaving Top Gear, he admitted, had left a big hole in his life. It wasn't just a job he was losing, it was part of his identity. As the dust settled, Clarkson faced the rubble of a life seemingly in free fall. In the span of a year, he had lost his mother, his marriage, and now his career. In 1 year, I lost my mother, my house, my job. He later summed up bluntly, the house was the family home in Chipping Norton that went to Francis in the divorce. Clarkson had quietly moved to a bachelor flat in London amidst the split. Now, paparazzi camped outside that flat as he left to face the world the morning after his firing. A gaunt figure in jeans and a rumpled blazer, eyes downcast. The man who had once exuded unflappable confidence on camera suddenly looked very sad, by his own admission, and older than his 55 years. For perhaps the first time, Clarkson publicly shouldered the blame. It was my own silly fault, he conceded of the Top Gear fiasco, so I could hardly complain. The swagger and bravado were muted. He sounded contrite and chastened. In interviews, he refrained from his usual barbs and acknowledged the BBC had given him a fair shot. I thank them for giving me such a long time there, he said, calling the BBC a great organization despite their parting. This humility was a new look for Clarkson, a sign of how far he had fallen and perhaps how much he understood it was largely self-inflicted. Privately, the emotional toll was immense. Clarkson's close friend and producer Andy Willman revealed that in the weeks after the firing, Jeremy was depressed and uncertain about his future. Clarkson himself admitted that year had brought more pressure than he could handle. It went on and on. Even for a jovial soul like me, it was very tricky tricky to handle, he said, reflecting on the endless investigations and personal traumas that preceded his breakdown. At one point during a 2016 interview, Clarkson broke into tears discussing his late mother, then, true to form, cracked an inappropriate joke to mask the pain. It was a poignant glimpse of a man full of regret, grief, and confusion, using humor as his crutch. Many wondered if this was the end of the road for Jeremy Clarkson. How does a man so closely identified with one show, so publicly tarnished, ever recover? For a moment, even Clarkson didn't know. He changed his Twitter bio to a single wistful line. "I used to be a presenter on the BBC 2 motoring show Top Gear. The finality of it hung in the air. Jeremy Clarkson, the once untouchable king of petrol-fueled television, was out of a job, his reputation bruised, his family gone. It seemed the consequences of his personal and professional missteps had finally caught up with him." And yet, in true Clarkson style, he was down but not out. Almost immediately, whispers began of a bidding war for Clarkson and his co-hosts. Television networks and streaming giants sensed opportunity in the uproar. By mid-2015, those whispers became headlines. Amazon Prime Video signed Clarkson, Hammond, and May to a blockbuster deal for a new car show. The trio would produce the Grand Tour, effectively Top Gear reborn under a different name, with the full freedom and deep pockets of Amazon behind them. The reported budget was staggering, up to $250 million for 3 seasons, and the move was unprecedented, a beloved British TV franchise migrating to an online platform. For Clarkson, it was a lifeline. He grabbed it with both hands. At the press announcement in July 2015, a bit of Clarkson's trademark wit resurfaced. "I feel like I've climbed out of a biplane and into a spaceship," he quipped, comparing the BBC to the bold new world of streaming. His smile and photos from that day, flanked by Hammond and May, looked genuinely happy, if still a touch defiant. The Grand Tour launched in late 2016 and was an immediate hit, proving that Clarkson's fan base was still intact and eager to follow him to new territory. Free from BBC's content policies, Clarkson was as irreverent as ever on the new show, but he also appeared reinvigorated. The scandal of 2015 was never explicitly referenced on air, yet its shadow loomed. Clarkson knew better than anyone that one misstep could now truly end his career. By most accounts, he behaved on set. "Our approach is to give program makers creative freedom. This is just the start," Amazon proclaimed of their star signing. With Amazon's backing, Clarkson had earned a second chance. Professionally, the Grand Tour marked a resurrection. Clarkson was entertaining millions again and, in his words, never complained about the BBC that had banished him. But something was different in this new chapter. Perhaps it was the absence of the personal troubles that had plagued him earlier. By 2017, Clarkson had settled into a stable relationship with Irish-born actress Lisa Hogan, and he seemed more relaxed about his place in the world. He even tried his hand at a genteel game show, becoming host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on ITV in 2018. The old Top Gear Clarkson, provocative, unfiltered, often flying off the handle, had not disappeared. He would stir new controversies in time, but he had been tempered by experience. The divorce that nearly ended his career had, in an ironic way, forced him to evolve. Clarkson's true image makeover came from an unlikely direction: farming. In 2021, he debuted a solo Amazon series called Clarkson's Farm, chronicling his attempt to run a 1,000-acre farm in the English countryside. What began as a light-hearted vanity project quickly revealed a side of Clarkson the public had rarely seen: humbled, compassionate, even empathetic. The show became a surprise phenomenon, and critics called it the best work of his career since Top Gear. Viewers watched as Clarkson traded supercars for tractors and confrontational sarcasm for earnest curiosity. He fumbled with sheep shearing, cursed the weather, and struggled under the weight of real responsibility. And in one unforgettable scene, the notorious tough guy wept after having to put down an ailing sheep, showing genuine heartbreak. Clarkson's Farm has shown a new, more empathetic side to an oft-combative petrol head, one reviewer noted, pointing out how the series even turned the outspoken Clarkson into an unlikely champion of the underrepresented farmers. By the end of the farm's first year, Clarkson himself seemed astonished at the transformation it had wrought in him. The man who once infamously punched a producer over a steak discovered a different measure of fulfillment. "I've never been happier," Clarkson reflected one evening at sunset, dirty and exhausted after a day's labor. Standing on his land in muddy boots, he felt a contentment that all the sports cars and TV fame had never quite delivered. Jeremy Clarkson was, at long last, at peace, or at least something close to it. a reflective Jeremy Clarkson on his farm in Oxfordshire, as shown in the Amazon series Clarkson's Farm, where the once hot-headed presenter found unexpected contentment in rural life. Jeremy Clarkson's divorce wasn't just a private heartbreak, it was the collision that nearly destroyed his empire. The loudest man in motoring suddenly had to face silence at home, and those cracks in his private life bled straight into the chaos that almost cost him everything on screen. But here's the twist, sometimes the wreckage clears a new road. Out of loss, Clarkson rebuilt. He traded scandal for second chances, and somehow turned disgrace into reinvention. He'll always be the man who drove cars faster than anyone else dared. But his real story is about the one crash he couldn't outdrive, and how it nearly ended his career. Because in the end, even Jeremy Clarkson had to learn, you can survive the wreck, but you never walk away without scars. Until next time, stay tuned and stay sideways.